Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. F Bukhari calling from Free Pakistan First Information Report. I'm going to talk about Syria today, the Sarin attack, the organophosphate poisoning of Syrian kids in an al-Nusra held an occupied region of Syria in Idlib. I know this happened on the morning of April 4th. It was a heinous war crime. Who committed it, we don't know, but right now I'm going to read an article from Information Clearinghouse. And this article was written by Paul Antonopoulos. And it says, I'm going to read all of it for you. It's very important that you listen to each and every word carefully because I think this is information that you want to listen to before you absorb any of the mainstream media's propaganda. At least 58 people, actually the number has now gone up to more than 100. At least 58 people were killed in an alleged horrific gas attack in the Idlib area this morning. However, even before investigations could be conducted and for evidence to emerge, Federica Mogherini, I repeat, Federica Mogherini, who's the Italian politician High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, condemned the Syrian government, stating that the Assad regime bears responsibility for awful Syria chemical attack. The immediate accusation from a high-ranking EU official serves as a dangerous precedent where public outcry can be made even before the truth surrounding the tragedy can emerge. Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu joined in on the condemnation, as did Amnesty International. Merely hours after the alleged chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun, supposedly by the Syrian government, polls are beginning to emerge from opposition sources discrediting the al-Qaeda-affiliated White Helmets' claims. So here's the thing, White Helmets was recently nominated for the Oscars, the movie, and then also for the Nobel Prize, and they've done a lot of humanitarian work in Syria. But the opposition to US and NATO and Saudi alliance, which includes Russia and Iran, they think that White Helmets is affiliated with Al-Qaeda. And it is a US-funded operation, and it is not completely humanitarian as it seems to be. So continuing with this article, for one in the White Helmets are handling the corpses of people without sufficient safety gear, most particularly with the masks mostly used, as well as no gloves. Although this may seem insignificant, understanding the nature of sarin gas that the opposition claim was used only opens questions. So basically what Paul is trying to say is that they are trying to handle dead bodies of kids and of civilians without even wearing gloves. Did not have gloves. They're wearing masks, but they're not wearing gloves in the pictures shown. And within seconds of exposure to sarin, the effects of the gas begins to target the muscle and nervous system. There's an almost immediate release of the bowels and the bladder, and vomiting is induced. When sarin is used in a concentrated area, it has the likelihood of killing thousands of people. Yet, such a dangerous gas, and the White Helmets are treating bodies with little concern to their exposed skin. This has to raise questions. I think this is a really valid point, but I think even before we come to this point, the valid point that Federica Mogherini, who's an Italian politician, High Representative of the European Union, she put all the blame of this attack on the Syrian government even before the news emerged. This is really concerning, that how can these officials come to find out about these attacks even before they are happening? There's only one way they would be able to know about these attacks: if they are doing it themselves or if they know people who are planning to do these. in order to create a false flag attack so that the upcoming peace talks in Brussels are violated. We recently had a terrorist attack in Russia, in St. Petersburg metro station, again to violate the US-Russia peace process. And now we have this chemical attack in order to find an excuse to invade Russia and Iran. Netanyahu is desperate to invade Iran. He is so desperate to invade Iran. And this kind of an attack will justify to the Americans and to the Europeans the reason why US and NATO forces should invade Iran next. Trump has condemned this attack and blamed the Assad regime, but Trump, being a good friend of Putin, will most likely try to avoid a Russian invasion. But I'm not so sure about Iran. I think all guns are right now trying to point at Iran, trying to invade Iran, trying to find an excuse to invade it. And this is something that has happened in the past as well. Countries have been invaded, and now we have all the blame game happening to find a reason, find an excuse to send forces into Iran or start airstrikes or bombardments, or you just name it. So continuing with this article, it is known that about 250 people from Majdal and Khattab were kidnapped by Al-Qaeda terrorists last week. Local sources have claimed that many of those dead from the chemical weapons were those from Majdal and Khattab. This would suggest that on the eve of upcoming peace negotiations, terrorist forces have once again created a false flag scenario. This bears resemblance to the Ghouta chemical weapons attack in August 2013, where the Syrian army was accused of using the weapons of mass destruction on the day that United Nations weapons inspectors arrived in Damascus. Later, Carla Del Ponte, a UN weapons inspector, said there was no evidence that the government had committed the atrocity. This had, however, not stopped calls for intervention against the Syrian government, a hope that the militant forces wished to eventuate from their use of chemical weapons against civilians in Ghouta. Therefore, it is completely unsurprising that Orient TV has already prepared a media campaign to cover the Russian and Syrian airstrikes in neighboring Hama countryside against terrorist forces, with the allegations that the air forces have been using chemical weapons. And most telling, the announcement of covering the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government hours before this allegation even emerged. Seemed like someone forgot to tell him that it would not occur for a few more hours before his tweet. And meanwhile, pickup trucks have been photographed around bodies of those killed. Again, it must be questioned why there are people around sarin gas without any protective gear and not getting affected at all when it can begin attacking the body within seconds. Also, the pickup trucks remain consistent to what local resources have said were used to transport many of the victims identified as kidnapped by Al-Qaeda terrorists from pro-government towns in rural Hama. Also, what is brought into question is where the location of the hose is coming from. In one of the pictures, a dugout carved into the rock. This could suggest that the location is at a White Helmet's base, where there are dugout hiding spots carved into the mountainside and where they have easy access to equipment. Both the Syrian government and the Russian governments have denied using any kind of chemical weapons on the civilians of Syria. And so right now, I think this is all being done, this is my opinion, this is all being done to violate any upcoming peace treaties that could bring peace in Syria. Because if there is peace in Syria, who's going to lose the most? Netanyahu is going to lose the most. Israel has a very strong chance of losing the Golan Heights, control over Golan Heights. And the pipeline, the famous pipeline that all the superpowers are trying to pursue in this area, that can be violated as well, because the pendulum of power is going to be more skewed towards the Russian government and Assad, who is still the legitimate leader and and uh, and the president of Syria, still has the ultimate say whom he wants to partner with. And obviously, he would not want to partner with people who've been bombarding his army. Also, Netanyahu, as I mentioned earlier, is desperate to invade into Iran because of his own concerns. And so this was all another false flag attack, killing civilians, treating them like guinea pigs, to convince the Europeans and to convince the Americans that a mass invasion into Syria with troops on the ground is very much justified, and the war should only escalate and should not subside. And it is very important to realize that if we did not read more than what the media is trying to feed us, we could possibly be responsible for orchestrating more war crimes in Syria. Syria needs a complete ceasefire. Syria needs a solution that involves no more guns, no more violence, no more weapons of mass destruction, no more of war crimes, no more of such heinous atrocities. We are humans. We have to prove that we are humans. This is not an act of a human. This is, someone has to be really sick, mentally unstable to come up with this kind of an attack on kids. If you look at the graphic pictures, it is totally brutal, and it has to be stopped. And the only people who can stop are not politicians. They are not bureaucrats. They are not the people sitting who are making policies for Syria. They're not even the United Nations humanitarians. Now we have the white helmets being implicated as being connected to Al-Qaeda. So who are they? They are people who have absolutely no background of politics, no background of media, no background of even humanitarian work, who are just civilians. These people who are walking on the road, who are busy in their own lives, simple civilians. I'm talking about the world. We're talking about 8 billion people. 8 billion people, regardless of their religion, regardless of their color, regardless of their background, should stand up and put an end to this kind of madness. That is the only solution for Syria. Because if we allowed the politicians and the bureaucrats to make decisions for Syria, trust me, Syria will keep on seeing more chemical attacks like this. So it is up to us, it is up to civilians like us who have absolutely no background to stand up and speak up and create a strong political, peaceful activism against the perpetrators of such atrocious crimes in the name of war. This is not acceptable. We cannot leave this kind of a legacy for our kids, because our kids 20 years from now are going to blame us for shutting up in response to this kind of an attitude. You want your kids to learn humanitarian lessons. You want your kids to be charitable. You want your kids to do the right things. You want your kids to pray. You want your kids to do good things, right? Be a good human being. But what are you guys doing? Your silence is your consent to continuation of this kind of a proxy war going on between superpowers that is killing at the ground level just civilians. So it's about time you guys realized your priorities.